The ambient noise level in the massive lobby of the Midtown corporate high-rise was deafening. It functioned as a chaotic echo chamber of clicking designer heels, rapid-fire phone conversations, and the relentless, suffocating hum of high-stakes financial anxiety. It was 0800 hours on a Tuesday morning. The building's air conditioning was set aggressively low, turning the expansive marble atrium into a sterile, freezing environment. My name is True Walker. I am 34 years old. I am a fire captain and the lead arson investigator for the city's primary municipal fire department. I do not wear bespoke Italian suits. I do not casually trade stock options over $14 lattes. And my daily operational environment usually involves heavy Kevlar turnout gear, thick toxic smoke, and assessing the physical stability of actively burning buildings. I am a functional, blue-collar component of the city's essential infrastructure. I was currently standing near the main security desk, deeply uncomfortable in my only formal suit, which pulled too tight across my heavy shoulders. I was only standing in this polished corporate lobby because my younger sister, Clara, had called me in a panic, begging me to deliver a critical, specialized environmental compliance report to her senior partner before a massive 0900 hours committee meeting. Clara is a junior paralegal, perpetually overwhelmed by her caseload, and her primary courier service had suffered a logistical failure this morning. I checked my heavy stainless steel watch. I had the sealed document tube secured firmly under my left arm. A woman walked rapidly across the slick marble floor toward the dedicated bank of executive elevators. She did not look like the other generic corporate associates milling around the coffee stand. She moved with a measured, deliberate, tightly coiled energy. Ava Martinez was 38 years old. I recognized her immediately from the frantic, highly descriptive stories Clara had provided over the last 3 years. She was the firm's lead environmental litigator, currently aggressively vying for a highly contested senior partnership. She wore a sharp, impeccably tailored charcoal suit that projected pure authority. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, flawless twist. However, my specialized investigative training requires me to read environments and locate hidden hazards before they flash over. I watched the rigid tension locking her jaw. I noticed the rapid, shallow cadence of her breathing. I observed the way her thumb continuously, rhythmically pressed against the brass latch of her heavy leather briefcase. She was not relaxed. She was scanning the lobby with the hyper-vigilance of a woman actively expecting an attack. A man stepped smoothly out from behind a decorative marble pillar, intentionally intercepting her direct path to the elevators. He wore a suit that likely cost more than my monthly salary. He possessed the arrogant, unyielding posture of a man entirely accustomed to dominating his space without consequence. I recognized the specific energy immediately. It was the frantic, controlling energy of a predator cornering prey. "Ava," the man said. His voice was intentionally loud enough to carry to the surrounding associates, packed with a dark, threatening undertone designed to assert dominance in the public space. "I reviewed your final presentation for the partnership committee last night. It's incredibly weak. You're focusing too heavily on the municipal compliance data. The senior partners don't care about environmental regulations. They care about billable hours." Ava stiffened completely. The color instantly drained from her face, leaving her pale. Her knuckles turned white as her hands clenched tightly around the handle of her briefcase. "Marcus," she replied, her voice dropping into a harsh, strictly defensive register. "My presentation is fully finalized. I am not altering the core data metrics 30 minutes before the final interview." "I'm a senior partner, Ava," Marcus Vance corrected, a cold, condescending edge bleeding into his tone. He stepped a fraction of an inch closer, entirely invading her personal space, actively trapping her against the polished metal doors of the elevator bank. "And I'm your ex-husband. I know exactly how you completely fall apart under pressure. You don't have the killer instinct for this tier? If you don't integrate my edits, I will personally guarantee the committee votes against you today. You will be completely marginalized." The pale, distinct ring mark I suddenly noticed on Ava's left hand made complete horrifying sense. Vance was the vindictive ex-husband, actively weaponizing his superior corporate position to deliberately force a professional failure, attempting to completely derail her career out of sheer, malicious spite. I do not involve myself in civilian emotional drama. I prefer the objective reality of thermal dynamics and fire patterns, but I absolutely do not tolerate predatory bullying in my immediate visual range. I stepped smoothly and decisively across the marble floor. I did not shout. I did not puff out my chest or attempt to posture like a tough guy. I simply utilized my large physical size and my grounded, street-smart energy to establish an immediate, unyielding physical boundary. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a flat, deadpan, heavily accented city rumble that forced Vance to either step back immediately or physically collide with my chest. "I require clear access to this specific elevator car." Vance glared up at me, his arrogant, controlling smile vanishing instantly. He looked at my slightly worn suit, the heavy, burn-scarred calluses on my hands, and my completely unimpressed expression with overt, upper-class disdain. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the courier delivering a highly sensitive document directly to Miss Martinez," I replied, maintaining absolute, unwavering eye contact. "You are currently standing directly in my required path of travel." Vance's jaw tightened visibly. He looked past my broad shoulder at Ava, attempting to re-establish his shattered dominance. "You're hiring outside muscle now, Ava? If this guy doesn't have proper security clearance, I will personally have building management remove him from the premises. My municipal fire investigator badge grants me administrative access to this lobby under city fire code," I stated quietly, refusing to engage in a pathetic posturing contest. "Building security already logged me in at the front desk. Now, step back." Vance sneered, realizing he had entirely lost the immediate physical intimidation angle in front of his ex-wife and the gathering crowd of associates in the lobby. He adjusted his expensive tie, turned sharply on his heel, and walked away, disappearing into a waiting elevator car. The heavy, suffocating tension in the immediate area slowly dissipated into the high ceilings. Ava let out a long, shuddering breath, pressing the heels of her hands firmly against her eyes to stop the tears of pure, adrenaline-fueled frustration from falling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice incredibly fragile, entirely dropping the polished corporate mask. "I shouldn't have let him corner me like that in public. He sits on the final partnership committee. He's been heavily threatening to kill my promotion for 6 months." I looked at the heavy polished metal doors of the elevator. I looked at the profound, systemic exhaustion lining her beautiful face. "He is utilizing public humiliation to force a psychological collapse," I analyzed plainly, stating the hard facts. "It is a coward's tactic." Ava dropped her hands, looking at me with a faint, deeply surprised expression. "You didn't ask me what happened. You didn't ask why we divorced, or what he just threatened. The historical data of your marriage is entirely irrelevant to the current tactical situation," I replied, holding out the sealed document tube. "He is an active hazard. I am here to deliver Clara's files. I will not let him near you while I am on this floor." She took the tube, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at my slightly crooked tie, a result of my hasty dressing that morning. She stepped closer, invading my space, and reached up. Her small, incredibly deft fingers quickly adjusted the knot of my tie, pulling it flush against my collar. It was a highly intimate, entirely unexpected gesture. She fixed my tie before the interview and said, "It's a bad idea to antagonize him, true. He has too much leverage." The scent of her perfume, faint and clean, completely bypassed my logical filters. I looked down at her hands, specifically noting the stark white ring mark again. "I can neutralize him publicly. But you need a visible shield," I told her quietly. I said, "My place. Tonight. Bring a ring." Ava froze, her hands dropping instantly from my chest. She stared at me, her dark eyes wide with shock. "Excuse me? You need a solid buffer," I explained, my voice dropping to a low, entirely serious register, stripping away any pretense. "He expects you to be isolated and vulnerable to his specific brand of corporate pressure. We are going to establish a massive, undeniable line in the sand. We are going to fake a relationship. If you are visibly engaged to an active fire captain, he cannot publicly harass you without severe social and professional blowback. Bullies only attack weak targets. I am not a weak target." She stared at me, her brilliant, analytical brain rapidly processing the complex logistical utility of the proposed strategy. "You would risk your own quiet life to actively run interference against a senior corporate partner for a woman you just met?" she asked, disbelief coloring her tone. "I run into burning buildings for a living, Ava," I noted, a faint, dry smile touching the corner of my mouth. "I do not find angry lawyers in expensive suits particularly intimidating." 7 o'clock. "Clara has my address." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing firmly in front of the elevators. At 1,900 hours that evening, I was in my small, functional apartment above an old hardware store in Brooklyn. The space was clean, sparse, and devoid of unnecessary clutter. A sharp, confident knock sounded at my door. I opened it. Ava stood in the hallway. She had changed out of her severe corporate suit into a pair of dark jeans and a simple, incredibly soft-looking cream sweater. She looked far more grounded, but the underlying tension was still visibly vibrating through her posture. She held up her left hand. A simple, understated silver band rested on her ring finger, perfectly covering the pale mark. "I brought a ring," she stated quietly. I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." She walked into the apartment, her eyes scanning the minimal furniture and the heavy, canvas turnout gear hanging neatly on a sturdy iron hook near the door. "The partnership interview concluded at noon," Ava reported, remaining standing near the small kitchen island. "I delivered the data perfectly." But Vance immediately filed a formal, highly irregular internal motion to delay the final committee vote until Friday. He explicitly claimed he received an anonymous tip regarding severe ethical violations in my recent environmental compliance reports. I frowned, a slow, dangerous movement of my brow. I crossed my arms over my chest. He is aggressively escalating his timeline. He realized the lobby intimidation failed, so he is manufacturing a crisis to steal your momentum. He claimed my team intentionally falsified fire safety inspection data for the new Hudson River Industrial Complex to secure the massive development contract, she explained, her voice tightening with anger. "It is a completely malicious, incredibly dangerous lie. But if the firm's compliance board formally investigates, my partnership is dead, and I could lose my legal license." The sheer, calculated malice of the trap hit my chest with the physical density of a sledgehammer. It was systemic extortion. He engineered a forced surrender, I analyzed aloud, my jaw tightening as the absolute cowardice of his tactic became glaringly apparent. "He cornered me," Ava confirmed, looking up at me with raw, desperate eyes. "I don't have the internal political connections to fight him in that boardroom. I have the raw data, but he controls the narrative." She looked at my heavy, calloused hands. "You stopped him this morning. You didn't flinch. I know it's insane to ask a virtual stranger, but I need someone to stand next to me in that room on Friday. I need a physical shield. Will you come with me?" I stared at her in the quiet apartment. "I'm a firefighter. My mandate is to suppress active flames and extract people from highly hazardous environments. I do not navigate complex corporate politics. Attending a highly publicized board hearing with a prominent litigator was entirely outside my operational parameters. But I do not tolerate extortion, and I adamantly refuse to let a woman be hunted simply because a coward believes she is alone. You require a physical presence to completely hold the ground against his intimidation tactics during the hearing," I stated, my voice dropping its polite cadence, shifting into a low, fiercely protective register. Ava's eyes widened slightly at the absolute certainty in my tone. "Yes. Can you do it?" "I am not a corporate attorney," I clarified gently, establishing the strict boundaries of my capability. "I cannot argue the finer points of environmental contract law." I stepped closer to her, invading her space, projecting absolute reliability. "However," I continued, looking directly into her eyes, locking my intent to hers, "I am an arson investigator. I am exceptionally highly trained to locate the absolute source of a fire, regardless of how deeply someone tries to bury the evidence. I'm going to heat his story until the metal warps. We are going to make him swing first on the public record. What time is the hearing?" For the next 4 days, my quiet apartment was completely transformed into a highly structured strategic command center. I utilized my accumulated vacation days. Ava relocated her operational setup to my small dining table. We did not waste precious time discussing the emotional fallout of her broken marriage. We operated entirely within the realm of hard data, strict timelines, and verifiable municipal documentation. Vance submitted the fabricated safety reports to the Internal Compliance Committee on Monday morning, Ava noted, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard, referencing her massive digital archive. "He officially claims the fraudulent data was uploaded from my secondary, private server during the initial bidding phase 2 months ago." I leaned against the kitchen counter, drinking black coffee, listening intently to the mechanics of the threat. Internal digital uploads are incredibly difficult to quickly authenticate in a rapid, hostile hearing. He expects you to panic and passionately defend your personal integrity. We won't do that. We attack the fundamental structure of the documents themselves. I am an environmental litigator, true. Ava smiled, a sharp, brilliant expression of pure competence that sent a strange, powerful spike of heat directly into my chest. I don't just write pretty legal briefs. Every single digital file my specific division generates, including our safety compliance reports, runs through a highly specialized, proprietary legal routing system. It automatically embeds a complex, hidden metadata tag. It's a digital watermark designed specifically to prevent our proprietary structural assessments from being stolen by rival firms. If Vance fabricated those safety reports on a standard commercial word processor and simply exported them to PDF, they absolutely won't have the routing tag. That is your primary hammer, I instructed, setting my coffee mug down. You handle the digital forensics. I will handle the physical motive. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called my sister, Clara. I need you to quietly access the firm's public procurement records for the secondary development company that bid against Ava's client 2 months ago. I want their corporate filings, their board of directors, and all available shell company ownership data. Ava looked at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. Why? Because men like Vance do not initiate a massive corporate scandal and risk a federal investigation purely out of romantic spite, I explained, leaning over the table. They do it for massive profit. If you lose your legal license, your major corporate contracts automatically default to the next approved bidder on the list. We need to find out exactly who benefits from your professional destruction. By 2300 hours on Thursday night, Clara successfully delivered the requested documents via a secure, encrypted courier drop. Ava slumped back heavily in her chair, meticulously reviewing the dense financial paperwork I laid out on the table. The adrenaline that had sustained her for days crashed abruptly, leaving her utterly depleted. He owns a 30% silent stake in the rival development firm, she whispered, her voice cracking, her hands trembling slightly on the desk as she read the disclosure forms. It was never just about punishing me for leaving him. He's weaponizing the firm's compliance committee to steal a $40 million municipal contract. She looked out the small window at the dark Brooklyn street. The raw vulnerability returned. Then she asked me to keep a secret. Don't tell anyone about this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. If the board finds out I was married to a man capable of this level of massive fraud, they'll assume I'm compromised by association. It's my entire career. I let him into my life because I thought we were building a solid foundation together. I did not offer a soft, generic platitude. I deal in structured defense and harsh reality. You assumed mutual integrity, I stated, my voice a low, steady rumble in the quiet apartment, cutting sharply through her self-doubt. The catastrophic failure of the system is entirely his liability, not yours. She turned her head to look at me, her dark eyes shining with unshed tears. You fight actual fires, true. You know exactly how this corporate world works. He has the immense political leverage. He has a fabricated claim built on unstable ground, I corrected gently. I stood up from the counter. I walked around to her side of the table. I did not ask for permission. I reached down and gently closed her laptop screen, physically severing her connection to the overwhelming stress. You have been fighting this battle continuously for 4 days, I noted, observing the deep exhaustion lined heavily around her eyes. You need to rest. I can't stop now, she argued weakly. You must, I commanded softly. I reached out. I placed my large, calloused hands firmly on her shoulders. The physical contact was sudden, but entirely non-aggressive. It was a physical anchor. I am profoundly unaccustomed to physical touch in my rigidly structured life, but the necessity of stabilizing her outweighed my own strict boundaries. Ava froze under my hands. Her breath hitched audibly. She didn't pull away. I am the shield, I reminded her, my thumbs resting protectively against her collarbones. You provided the architecture. The burden of execution transfers to me. You are officially off the clock. She looked up into my face, searching the unyielding lines of my jaw for any sign of doubt. She found none. Okay, she breathed, the frantic fight draining out of her. She leaned back slightly, allowing my hands to bear a fraction of her physical weight. What do we do tomorrow? We test the factual foundation of his lies in front of highly hostile witnesses, I promised, my voice a rough whisper. Go to sleep, Ava. Friday afternoon. 1,400 hours. I walked into the massive, sterile lobby of the corporate law firm. The building was imposing, lined with heavy glass and steel designed to project absolute authority. I wore a sharp, tailored dark suit. My posture was perfectly rigid. I found Ava standing in the quiet, heavily carpeted hallway outside the heavy mahogany doors of the primary senior boardroom. She looked pale, clutching her laptop tightly against her chest. "The senior partners aren't going to listen to me, True," she said, her voice tight as I approached. "Vance has too many financial allies in that room." I stopped exactly 1 foot in front of her. I offered concrete, physical power. "You are going to walk into that room and demand a live review of the digital evidence," I stated, my voice a deep, unshakable anchor. "And what about the fabricated safety reports?" she asked. "You will dismantle the reports," I promised. "I will dismantle the man." "Are you ready?" Ava took a slow, deep breath. Her spine straightened. The brilliant litigator returned. "I'm ready," she said. We pushed through the heavy mahogany doors and entered the massive boardroom. The room was incredibly tense. The managing partner sat at the head of the long glass table, flanked by 12 senior partners. Marcus Vance sat to the right, looking incredibly smug, a thick stack of printed papers resting on the polished wood. "Miss Martinez," the managing partner said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "This formal compliance hearing is highly irregular, as is the presence of your associate." He shot a sharp, dismissive look at me. "Who is this individual?" "I am Captain True Walker, municipal arson investigator," I announced, projecting my heavy voice to command the massive acoustic space instantly. I did not sit down. I walked directly to the center of the room, standing slightly behind and to the left of Ava, establishing a highly visible physical buffer. Ava's counsel filed me as a technical consultant for the record prior to this emergency review. The managing partner approved the addition. "I am also her fiancé," Vance scoffed loudly, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. "The only liability here is your client, Walker. She oversaw a highly unethical municipal bidding process, intentionally falsified critical fire safety metrics, and I have the printed reports to prove it. Her partnership bid is completely dead." "My division operates with absolute integrity," Ava interjected, her voice ringing out with crystal clarity. She stepped to the podium and connected her laptop to the room's primary display monitor. "And I formally request that this board instantly review the digital metadata of the submitted evidence." The senior partners turned their heads, watching her undeniable, fearless posture. "It's a manufactured distraction," Vance shouted, his face flushing violently red. "The printed reports prove the massive corruption. They have her specific digital signature block." Ava ignored him entirely. She opened the files on the massive screen. "Notice the completely missing proprietary legal routing hash," Ava directed, her voice commanding the entire room. "Every single piece of sensitive correspondence my division creates runs through a secure server that automatically embeds a specific, trackable digital watermark. These PDFs lack that watermark entirely. Furthermore, the embedded PDF producer string and the font package mismatch conclusively prove these documents were generated exactly 48 hours ago on a standard consumer-grade word processor, not 2 months ago on my secure server. The chain of custody is completely broken. They are absolute, undeniable forgeries." The room grew very still. The managing partners leaned forward, staring at the undeniable digital proof flashing on the screen. Vance stood up abruptly, his heavy chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She altered the files! She's lying to save her career!" I stepped forward, moving smoothly away from Ava, intentionally drawing his aggressive, panicked focus entirely onto myself. "She doesn't need to lie," I stated, my voice a low, heavy rumble that carried across the polished table. "Because I understand exactly why you fabricated them." I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a simple manila folder. I did not slam it down theatrically. I placed it quietly and deliberately onto the table, directly in front of the managing partner. "Those are public municipal procurement records and corporate shell filings," I dictated, staring dead-eyed at Vance, surgically stripping away his false corporate authority. "You hid a massive, undisclosed financial stake in the secondary development firm that bid against Miss Martinez's primary client. You fabricated a severe safety defect to deliberately force a structural fracture in her contract. You actively tried to break her firm to line your own pockets." Vance's face completely drained of all color. He looked at the folder, his hands beginning to shake uncontrollably. That is a severe ethics violation and massive corporate fraud, I continued relentlessly, taking one slow, deliberate step toward him. You have immense criminal exposure, Marcus. The federal district attorney will absolutely eat you alive over this level of data manipulation. The massive boardroom fell into a cold, hard, suffocating silence. There was no dramatic yelling. There was only the brutal reality of a man entirely trapped by his own massive hubris. The managing partner stared at the financial disclosures, his expression rapidly darkening with the sudden realization of severe legal liability for the firm. He looked up at Vance. The managing committee moves to immediately dismiss this fabricated complaint and fully restore Miss Martinez's partnership candidacy pending the district attorney's review of these highly disturbing documents, the managing partner said, his voice dangerously calm. Marcus, your voting rights are immediately suspended. Surrender your firm credentials and leave this room. Vance didn't argue. He couldn't. He looked at the irrefutable data resting on the table. He slumped forward, his arrogant posture completely breaking. He stood up in silence, entirely defeated, and walked out of the hearing room without a single word. I turned my back on the empty chair. The factual foundation of Miss Martinez's data is verified, I announced softly to the silent board members. I turned and walked out of the room, Ava following close behind. 10 minutes later, we were standing in the quiet, heavily carpeted hallway of the executive floor. The defensive armor she had worn for a grueling week was completely gone. She looked radiant and incredibly free. She walked slowly toward me. You completely crushed him, she said, her voice filled with quiet wonder. You walked into a room full of highly hostile corporate lawyers and took his entire trap apart. He thought you'd bend. He forgot steel springs back. I analyzed plainly, stating the physical facts, my hands resting safely in my pockets to maintain my own internal discipline. He thought I was entirely alone. He drastically misread the weight in the room, she smiled. A brilliant, unguarded expression. The professional distance between us vanished entirely in the empty hallway. She reached out. She didn't shake my hand to offer formal, polite thanks. She placed her palm flat against the lapel of my dark suit, right over my chest. It was a deeply grounding contact that sent an uncalculated shockwave through my highly regulated system. The board formally approved my promotion, she noted, her voice dropping its sharp, professional edge, replacing it with a quiet loyalty. My heart rate elevated, a sudden, powerful rhythm drumming heavily against my ribs. I looked down at her. The heat is off the metal. The space is yours. I told them the truth, Ava whispered, stepping a fraction of an inch closer, her dark eyes locked fiercely onto mine. I told them that our temporary, strategic arrangement as consultant and client had officially concluded. I felt a sudden, sharp drop in my chest. The job was done. The perimeter was secure. It was time to return to the firehouse. And then, she continued, her thumb lightly tracing the expensive wool fabric of my suit, her breath hitching slightly, I formally asked if my highly competent, incredibly handsome fake fiancé was available for a real, entirely unmanaged dinner date tonight. Without the armor, without the corporate strategy, just us. I froze. My hands felt clumsy. I pulled my right hand from my pocket and nervously rubbed the back of my neck. The cynical, isolated detachment I had maintained for years was irrevocably fractured by her proximity. I am not accustomed to formal dining environments, Ava, I admitted, my voice a rough, quiet rumble, revealing a genuine crack in my armor. I am profoundly out of my element with this. I prefer a direct approach, she said softly, squeezing my lapel gently, anchoring me to the present moment, accepting the flaw completely. I looked at the fierce intelligence and warmth in her eyes. I didn't need a perfectly safe, heavily controlled perimeter anymore. I just needed reality. I lifted my right hand. I wrapped my calloused fingers gently over hers where it rested against my chest. I held her hand firmly against my racing heart. Then I accept the invitation? I replied. The end.